Welcome to The Explainer. So, when we think about the origins of economic thought, our minds almost always jump straight to figures like Adam Smith or Karl Marx, right? But what if I told you there's a much quieter truth hiding way back in the medieval world? Today, we're diving into how a largely forgotten 11th century Muslim scholar actually diagnosed the root causes of our modern financial crises. And the crazy part, he did it nearly 1,000 years ago, long before capitalism, central banks, or even modern stock markets were even a thing. It begs a pretty serious question. What happens when a civilization gets rich faster than it gets wise? I want you to really just sit with that for a second. Because this urgent, incredibly relevant question, it wasn't posed by some Wall Street analyst yesterday. No, it was asked 900 years ago by a thinker who, quite frankly, understood human nature and the sheer mechanics of greed better than a lot of modern economists do today.
Section 1. The 11th Century Warning, A Tale of Two Worlds.
To really understand where complex economic thought actually began, we've got to look at the stark contrast between two worlds around the year 1100 CE. So, on one side, you have Europe. It's fragmented, relatively poor, still kind of crawling its way out of the wreckage of the early Middle Ages. But on the exact opposite side, you have the Islamic Golden Age. We are talking about an absolute powerhouse of an empire, stretching from Spain all the way to Persia. Cities like Baghdad, Damascus, and Cairo were wealthy, incredibly sophisticated intellectual hubs. Their trade routes were literally pulsing with caravans carrying silk, spices, and silver. The markets were just bustling. But with this booming commerce came rising inequality. Wealth was transforming society way faster than anyone could really comprehend.
And right in the middle of this booming, increasingly unequal world emerges Abu Hamid al-Ghazali. Born in Persia in 1058, he was a philosopher, a jurist, a theologian, and a critic. Actually, by his mid-30s, he already held one of the most prestigious teaching positions in the entire Islamic world. But instead of just sitting back and enjoying his elite status, he became this fierce social critic. He looked around and saw a society completely obsessed with money, but drifting so far away from meaning. It was an economy that was thriving on the outside, sure, but decaying on the inside.
Section 2. The True Purpose of Money, a Mirror, Not a God. Now, al-Ghazali analyzed money fundamentally differently than his peers. He wasn't looking at it just through math or accounting ledgers. He looked at the psychological and spiritual impact it had on society. While a lot of Europeans at the time saw wealth purely as land or hoarded loot, al-Ghazali saw money as a mere facilitator, a tool, not something to be worshipped and definitely not a status symbol. He understood something absolutely crucial. Gold and silver coins, they have no real intrinsic value. You can't eat them, right? They don't keep you warm. Their only true function is to facilitate exchange, encourage cooperation, and just make trade possible.
And this brings us to this incredibly beautiful metaphor he used. He compared money to a mirror. He said, a mirror has no value on its own. Its worth comes from what it reflects. And money is exactly the same thing. Its true power isn't in the shiny metal itself. It's in the human effort, the labor, the goods, and the societal cooperation that it allows people to actually build.
Moving on to Section 3. 3 symptoms of decay. 3 economic sins.
So if money is just a tool for cooperation, what happens when it gets misused? Well, al-Ghazali identified 3 primary ways that human greed essentially dismantles the balance of a society. And he didn't just view these as bad business practices, he viewed them as fundamental economic sins. We're talking about hoarding wealth, unchecked speculation, and currency debasement. Okay, let's break these down one by one to see exactly how they rot an economy from the inside out.
The first symptom is hoarding wealth. He famously described this as freezing the bloodstream of society. Al-Ghazali argued that hoarded money is, it's essentially dead money. Think about it. When the wealthy lock their resources away in chests or hidden accounts, they create this artificial scarcity. It isn't that society lacks the resources, it's that the circulation is completely blocked. Idle wealth doesn't feed workers, it doesn't fund trade, and it really distorts prices. It literally starves the working economy of the capital it desperately needs to survive. Then we have the second symptom, unchecked speculation. Let me tell you, al-Ghazali had zero patience for merchants who manipulated prices, created artificial shortages, or exploited crises just to make a quick buck. He literally wrote, "Whoever profits from the suffering of others profits from corruption." He didn't see this kind of speculative behavior as some clever, savvy business strategy. To him, it was a moral contagion, because profit without actual contribution destroys market trust, and once that trust is broken, the contagion spreads like wildfire through institutions in the entire society.
And the third symptom points the finger right at the rulers themselves, currency debasement. See, medieval rulers would often dilute the gold or silver content of their coins to sort of magically stretch their state budgets. Turns out, medieval kings were the original inventors of stealth inflation. Who knew? But Al-Ghazali called this exactly what it was: outright theft. By manipulating the currency, rulers were punishing the poor, who always ended up with the weaker coins, and completely destabilizing the financial system from the top down.
Which brings us to Section 4, the collapse of trust, a chain reaction.
Now, this is where we get to Al-Ghazali's ultimate thesis about what actually holds an economy together. Because, spoiler alert, it isn't just laws and it isn't just gold. He warned that corruption at the top radiates downward like a poison. Think of it as a chain reaction. It starts with the state. When rulers cheat their populations by diluting the currency, they set a terrible precedent. Next, merchants see this and think, hey, why not? And feel entirely justified in cheating their customers with false weights or hiding defects. And finally, everyday individuals look around at this broken system and see absolutely no reason to act responsibly themselves. Before you know it, the entire moral ecosystem just completely disintegrates.
And that leads us to this incredibly stark conclusion. A society can survive poverty. People can endure really hard times if they stick together. But a society absolutely cannot survive corruption. Economies don't just collapse because they run out of money or resources. They collapse because people simply stop trusting each other. Trust is the invisible glue holding every contract, every single currency, and every market together. Once that trust is gone, the whole shebang just shatters.
Section 5. 1,000 years later, echoes of the past.
As you'll see, history clearly repeats itself when we ignore these lessons. Al-Ghazali basically predicted that if a state manipulates its currency too often, the population will eventually just lose trust and abandon it completely. We saw this back in 1100 CE with medieval coin debasement, right? But we also saw it in the 1920s with Weimar Germany, in Zimbabwe in the 2000s, and man, we are definitely seeing the echoes of it in present-day global inflation anxieties. When people no longer trust the promises behind their money, the system just stops functioning. Period.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how little human behavior has actually changed over a millennium. I mean, Al-Ghazali's 11th century warning about hoarding wealth in hidden chests, that perfectly mirrors today's debates about billionaires and offshore accounts. His warnings about speculation, they directly echo our modern concerns over housing crises, shadow banking, and, crazy crypto volatility. And his condemnation of diluting silver coins strikes right at the heart of today's debates about runaway debt and stealth monetary inflation. Sure, the technology we use today is way faster, but the human greed, it's literally identical.
He left us with this ultimate, honestly kind of chilling warning. Where justice is lost, prosperity cannot remain. Al-Ghazali completely understood that wealth without social responsibility makes any civilization incredibly brittle. If a society's systems don't align incentives toward productive, honest behavior, it's inevitably going to drift toward self-destruction. A purely selfish society eventually collapses right under its own weight, taking absolutely everyone down with it. So I'll leave you with this final, provocative thought to chew on. Ask yourself, are our modern financial crises really a failure of math, or are they a failure of morality? Al-Ghazali taught us that money isn't just some mechanical object, it's a living moral ecosystem. Understanding this isn't just about brushing up on history, it is absolutely crucial for your own financial protection. Because if we detach money from morality, the system will eventually, inevitably break. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep questioning the systems around you.